I mean, Ron, the vice president by design exists to serve if the president cannot. So it makes sense that in this current internal Democratic debate that Kamala Harris should be at the very top of the list if Joe Biden somehow decides to bow out, although again, he's not indicating he's willing to do that.
Absolutely. So there's no vacancy yet. But if there's a vacancy, the vice president is the first person you think of. If, in fact, we were talking about Joe Biden resigning the presidency or somehow becoming incapacitated, then she would be the president in effect, and possibly more than in effect. She might actually have to be sworn in. So there are some analogies for that. What we don't have is any real clear precedent for going to a convention where the party has not entirely settled the question of whether their incumbent president or the incumbent vice president should go forward as the nominee. That is at least in modern political history, that is not something we're familiar with, so we're truly in terra incognita.
Asma, in your reporting, do you get the sense that there's any wings of the Democratic Party or activists within the party that are agitating for Harris to take over?
I will say there's certainly Democratic activists, Democratic lawmakers even we've heard from, who suggest that Harris represents a younger generation of the Democratic Party, and this is something Biden suggested a few years ago when he ran, that he would be a bridge candidate to a younger generation. So folks do see Harris in this view. She has, I think, broadly in the role of vice president evolved over the last few years. I think some of our listeners probably recall that when she first stepped into the job, it wasn't particularly a comfortable fit for her. She stumbled particularly on that assignment to figure out the root causes of migration. But I will say, I think after the Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe versus Wade, she really found an issue in which she is very comfortable in which the Democratic Party also really, really needs her. And so I will say, going out, covering her, seeing how voters are responding to her, it feels fundamentally different now in the last several months compared to how it did at the outset of her vice presidency.
Also, there's also a part of this campaign that in many ways Republicans and Donald Trump have been running against Kamala Harris from the start. They have raised Joe Biden's age and mental fitness long before the debate performance, and they are prepared to run against a Kamala Harris candidate if they have to.
That's right. She's long been a sort of favorite target for some conservatives, but I do think that the attacks on her are escalating after the debate. We saw the Trump campaign put out an ad that said that a vote for Biden is really a vote for Harris, and then we heard Trump himself at a rally this past week in Florida going on the offense against both Biden and Harris, and that's not something we traditionally hear from him.
The radical left Democrat Party is divided in chaos and having a full-scale breakdown, all because they can't decide which of their candidates is more unfit to be president. Sleepy, crooked Joe Biden or laughing Kamala.
I mean, Ron, there's certainly a subtext here that the Democratic Party, irrespective of what's happening now with Joe Biden, hasn't had a whole lot of faith in Kamala Harris in the first 4 years of the Biden administration. Like, there are, aside from the Republican attacks, there are also clearly Democratic doubts that she has what it takes to win.
Many people remember the campaign that she ran in the early stages of the 2020 cycle, mostly 2019, and apart from landing a few good solid blows against Joe Biden, ironically enough, in one of the debates, she didn't really have very many strong moments, and her campaign essentially fizzled out before they got to Iowa and New Hampshire. So that's not a great recommendation to be an independent presidential candidate. On the other hand, she did provide something the party needed in 2020. It needed more outreach beyond white males. It needed somebody on the ticket besides Joe Biden who could bring in and harness the energy of younger people, people of color, and women voters. And this, I think, it's clear to say, provided some of that, at least symbolic evidence that she was the reason Joe Biden won in 2020, probably had more to do with Donald Trump. But she did fill a need. Now, they have a very different need now. And it is not the same as somebody who is a supplement to a candidate. It is a need for a candidate. And yet, for all kinds of structural and legal reasons, if Joe Biden can't answer the bell, is persuaded that he can't answer the bell, she is in a position to take over in a way that no one else is.
Rod, I do think that part of why we're seeing her being sort of tossed about in the conversation more than you did maybe, let's say, 2 years ago, is because the Democrats
anecdata echoed what our poll said. It was still a pretty static race. It hadn't moved anybody off the fence from their original positions after the debate. But when they subbed in Kamala Harris instead of Joe Biden and gave these voters the options, she did better than Biden, because what she did is she got people who were willing to vote third party off the fence and back supporting a Democrat. And I think that that is a factor here that can't be undercounted. It's pretty clear from our poll, all the data we're seeing, in a hyper-polarized environment, Democrats are going to stick with Joe Biden no matter what. Republicans are sticking with Trump no matter what. It's those in-betweens. It's the stay-at-homes, it's the third-party leaders, it's the swing voters that are really up for grabs. And there is some polling data and anecdote that suggests that shaking up the ticket might draw in more of those people who are, quite frankly, very unsatisfied with the two top of the tickets right now.
Let's remember, too, that if Joe Biden were to step aside, or if he had to step aside, that nominating Kamala Harris only fills one of the slots on that ticket. So some other person could yet be added who might change the atmosphere, the discussion, the discourse one more time.
I think this is all a really interesting conversation, but I do think we should be very clear that as of now, Biden is sticking in this race. I was speaking this morning to a senior Biden campaign advisor. They feel optimistic about how Biden's press conference went last night. And so I think we're in this weird position where after the news conference last night, Biden, his team, they feel like it was sufficient. At the same time, though, I don't think that press conference completely quieted Democratic angst. And so we're in this sort of weird limbo phase where I don't know really what it's going to be.
And yet, after that press conference, at least two more Democrats on Capitol Hill called for him to get out of the race. All right, let's take a quick break. When we get back, we're going to talk about how Republicans are getting ready for their convention.
This message comes from NPR sponsor, Sapa. Founder and CEO Ron Rudson shares the story of how he got started creating Sapa.
In 2007-2008, I went out and I bought the most popular luxury mattresses. I tore them apart and I realized, based on the dermatologist's cost and the analysis that I had done, that I was able to sell that level mattress with a very affordable price.
To learn more, go to SAATVA.com/NPR. This message comes from NPR sponsor Anthropic. Claude by Anthropic is generative AI for everyone, offering groundbreaking intelligence. Join thousands of enterprises and stay at the frontier of AI. Learn more at anthropic.com/Claude.
This message comes from NPR sponsor Shopify, the global commerce platform that helps you sell and show up exactly the way you want to. Customize your online store to your style. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/NPR. Support for NPR and the following message come from Bombas. Bombas makes absurdly soft socks, underwear, and t-shirts. And for every item you purchase, Bombas donates another to someone facing homelessness. Get 20% off your first purchase at bombas.com/NPR and use code NPR.
And we're back, and the Republican National Convention starts Monday in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and former President Donald Trump will accept the nomination for the third time to be the party's nominee. Ron, a couple weeks ago, I don't think that we thought that the Milwaukee convention would be the less newsy one we could do this summer, but considering what Chicago might be like, it looks like this might be a fairly routine convention experience.
Routine in the sense that there is no question it is entirely the Donald Trump show. Only question is who else gets to share some of the stage time with the former president. And right now, the betting seems to be getting heavier on one particular man in the three-person field that the president had narrowed it to. And I think that probably at this point is producing a certain amount of tension within that camp, because they're afraid that if there's too much attention for J.D. Vance, that will begin to sort of threaten Donald Trump just a little bit, and if he hasn't made up his mind, and he is at all concerned about having to share the real excitement of this convention as opposed to just a few moments on stage, he might feel a little crowded by the ambition of J.D. Vance, and also think ahead to what the latter part of this next term might be like, as J.D. Vance increasingly insisted that this was the Trump-Vance administration, and he was going to continue it in his first term as president. So that's a consideration.
I like that you've already figured figured out that J.D. Vance is going to be the likely vice presidential nominee. Clearly, that's who you've picked in the beepstakes. If you think the Ohio senator is definitely on the short list for the running mate that we don't know yet, at least in this taping.
Well, there's every reason to think that Trump might still remember some of the things that J.D. Vance said about him back before he got on the Trump train. But all that is essentially water over the dam if Trump can't forget it. Vance just seems to have more electricity than the other two people that we've been talking about, although there's always that theory that Donald Trump would rather share the stage with somebody relatively colorless like Doug Burgum, the governor of North Dakota. And a third person in that triumvirate, if you will, would be Marco Rubio, the senator from Florida. As Trump likes to say, there might be some problems with the Constitution because you can't have two candidates from the same state, but we could get past that. I feel like that's been a little bit of a signal that he's not really that serious about Rubio.
Ron, you've covered a lot of conventions. I think for a lot of our listeners, especially at least in the context of the Democratic Party, looking at the convention, there's this question of like, why are these still necessary? What is the point of these conventions, and why do they still exist?
They have two functions. One is a legal one. The convention delegates actually choose the nominee. Well, we have been saying, of course, for months that we knew it was going to be Trump and Biden, and that's not wrong. It doesn't become legal until the convention does it. And so that's how they automatically get their access to all 50 state ballots, because these are ongoing major parties that regularly get big chunks of the vote, and therefore, under state law, they get on the ballot, and whoever they nominate is a ballot access candidate. So that's a big function. And normally we don't think about that too much, but this year, at least in the Democratic Party, it's getting to be kind of tense. On the Republican side, not at all, but the other function of the conventions, which has been front and center in recent decades, really ever since we went to the system of having the delegates chosen by primaries and caucuses rather than by internal party processes. And it's been, 50 years now since we've been using this new system. And under this new system, generally speaking, there isn't a lot of suspense, but there's a lot of time to fill on network television.
the LBJ Presidential Library. And this is a president who has often likened himself to these key historical moments as somebody who's passed a lot of pieces of major legislation like Johnson, but they're...
Johnson says, you know what, I've got problems as the nominee of this party, and therefore I am going to step aside, and I will not seek, nor will I accept the nomination of my party. Now, there's a quote from LBJ that some people, at least, would like to hear Joe Biden quote right now.
All right, before we take a break, we should note that NPR will have special coverage of the RNC on your local member station, hosted by yours truly, and at npr.org, as well as the Politics Podcast, which is going to be in your feeds late every night with a recap of what happened. So don't worry, we'll have you covered. Let's take one more break, and when we get back, time for Can't Let It Go.
This message comes from NPR sponsor Mint Mobile. From the gas pump to the grocery store, inflation is everywhere. So Mint Mobile is offering premium wireless starting at just $15 a month. To get your new phone plan for just $15, go to mintmobile.com/switch.
This episode's sponsor is Carvana, which offers the following message. Whether you're looking to sell your car in a hurry or thinking about parting ways with your trusty ride, Carvana is the convenient way to sell your car. Go to Carvana.com to get an offer for your vehicle in seconds.
This message comes from NPR sponsor Capella University. Capella's programs teach skills relevant to your career, so you can apply what you learned right away. See how Capella can make a difference in your life at capella.edu. This message comes from NPR sponsor Mint Mobile. From the gas pump to the grocery store, inflation is everywhere. So Mint Mobile is offering premium wireless starting at just $15 a month. To get your new phone plan for just $15, go to mintmobile.com/switch.
And we're back, and it's time for Can't Let It Go, the part of the show where we talk about the things that we just cannot stop thinking about, politics or otherwise. Ron, what can't you let go of this week?
1968 just won't go away. It just keeps popping back. There was a headline in a Wall Street Journal this morning about how the protesters in Chicago want to make 2024 great like 68. And for those who don't know the history, there were massive anti-war protests in the streets of Chicago that turned into a battle for Michigan Avenue, as it was called, between the police and the anti-war demonstrators. And it turned into a fight even inside the convention hall that year in 1968, and it was all in part because of the Vietnam War and also because the party was in disarray because LBJ had pulled out, as I alluded to earlier, and it was a tough convention to emerge from. Interesting point about that in 68 though was that they did eventually turn it over to the vice president for LBJ, a guy named Hubert Humphrey, pretty well known in his own right. So there's that for them to think of, but there's just 68 all over the place. The Rolling Stones are on tour, and they apparently have dropped reference to Who Killed the Kennedys, one of the famous lines from Sympathy for the Devil, one of their signature songs. That was first changed in 1968. Now they've dropped it entirely. People are full of conspiracy theories about that. So it just doesn't want to go away, and it does not seem to be going away anytime soon.
The one constant in our politics from 1968 till now might be the Rolling Stones, because they are still touring.
When you said that, I legitimately, I was surprised. I did not know that they were still touring.
Well, and you know, you would have to say that we have the if they think that Mick Jagger is too old to be the lead singer.
Hey, Joe Biden could use a little bit of that Mick Jagger energy. You know what I mean? I've seen Mick Jagger performing it. He's still got it. He might not 1968 still got it, but he's still 1998 still got it, I think.
So what can't you let go of this one?
J.D. Vance's beard. The potential running mate of Donald Trump. There was a report this week in the Bulwark that if it's not J.D. Vance, one of the negatives against him, and I admit I don't think I knew this prior to reading the story, is that he has a beard. And
That's a negative. So people don't like the beard?
Well, specifically Donald Trump. That Donald Trump is known, I did not know this, but has been vocal in the past about how he does not like facial hair on men. He likes people to be clean shaven. As we have well established over the years, the way people look matters a lot to Donald Trump.
Hasn't Donald Trump Jr. had a beard?
This is part of my Can't Let It Go. It's a little bit of the psychology here. Is that his own son, named after him, Donald Trump Jr., has been known to sport a beard. I do have to feel like I have to disclose something here. I'm a bit of a pro-beard myself. My husband has a beard. I think that men look very nice with beards. But it is funny to me that in the, like, what do I need in a running mate, facial hair could be part of the issue. Although Donald Trump spoke about this himself. He was asked about the report. He said he has no issue with the beard and said that J.D. Vance looks like a young Abraham Lincoln, which is probably the finest compliment you could give a 39-year-old Republican. So, Ron, I know you probably have many feelings about facial hair. I don't know if all of our listeners know this, but you have a spectacular mustache. Have I left Ron Evans speechless? Talking about the mustache is what takes the words out of his brains. We finally found it.
I've been described as a yeah, well, or Scandinavia. There is a long-standing prejudice in American politics against beards. Now, of course, obviously, Abraham Lincoln and others in his era all had beards. It was absolutely automatic. You had to have to show you were a real man, a grown man. But that's been out of fashion for many years, many generations. So that's a long-standing prejudice, and it may be about to be broken.
Husband, what about you?
Okay, so mine is rather lighthearted. So I was reading that there are plans for this Devil Wears Prada sequel, and I don't know if you all saw the original, but I loved the movie. I love like lighthearted things that I don't have to think about that much when I watch TV or films, and the Devil Wears Prada is like that. But Entertainment Weekly is reporting that a bunch of people from the original cast are in talks.
Time for a quick break to talk about McDonald's. Mornings are for mixing and matching at McDonald's. For just $3, mix and match 2 of your favorite breakfast items, including a savory sausage McMuffin, sausage biscuit, sausage burrito, and crispy hash browns. With McDonald's Mix and Match, you can't go wrong. Price and participation may vary. Cannot be combined with any other offer or combo meal. Single item at regular price.
Hi, my name is Eli Saslow, and I'm a writer-at-large for the New York Times. As a journalist who spends most of my time out in the country talking to voters, I hear about election denialism constantly. This is not some far-flung conspiracy theory. A third of people who are in our Congress right now, and more than 60% of Republicans in the United States, believe that Joe Biden was fraudulently elected. They do not believe in elections. They think our democracy is fundamentally broken and not working. I wanted to try to understand that better, and also to understand what it meant in places when they had lost all faith in elections and in our ability to run them. So I started calling election administrators all around America. I became particularly interested in Nevada because it's a swing state where potentially every vote matters, every county matters, and it's also a place where some of these conspiratorial ideas about what's happening in our elections have taken deep root. So I started talking to more than a dozen clerks around the state. What I learned from many of these clerks was that their lives had become massively difficult, and their jobs, frankly, had become a living hell. Death threats are relatively common. All kinds of skepticism from people that they meet in the grocery stores, in these small towns where they know the voters, and the voters still believe about them that they're doing a bad job. But the phone call that shocked me the most was when I reached out to a woman named Cindy Elgin, who's the clerk in Esmeralda County. It's a really small place. Everybody knows everybody. The whole county has less than 1,000 people. And it's a place that voted 82% for President Donald Trump in 2020. And Cindy, the elected Republican county clerk, has been a major leader in this community for a long time. She's had her job for 20 years. Everybody always thought she was doing it well. She helped start the annual rodeo. She hosts the local Thanksgiving, where dozens of people come every single year. It's the main community event. And Cindy herself is a Republican who flies a Donald Trump flag in front of her house. And yet now, because of these deeply seated conspiratorial ideas about elections, people in her county started to distrust the machines. Then they'd come to distrust the people who were doing the counting. They wanted hand counting. They'd come to distrust all these phases of the process. And as this tide got louder and louder and louder, they then started to distrust Cindy. When I first reached out to Cindy, she said, "What's happening to me right now is they're trying to recall me from office." Her friends, her neighbors, these people who she'd hosted at Thanksgiving, had instead become convinced that she was a tool of the deep state cabal who was trying to skim votes away from Trump in this far-flung county in Nevada. And that's where my story starts. Today's Sunday Read was produced by Tally Abacassis. The original music was written and performed by Aaron Esposito. Cindy Elgin glanced into the lobby of her office and saw a sheriff's deputy waiting at the front counter. "Let's start a video recording, just in case this goes sideways," Elgin, 65, told one of her employees in the Esmeralda County Clerk's office. She had come to expect skepticism, conspiracy theories, and even threats related to her job as an election administrator. She grabbed her annotated booklet of Nevada state laws, said a prayer for patience, and walked into the lobby to confront the latest challenge to America's electoral process. The deputy was standing alongside a woman that Elgin recognized as Mary Jane Zakis, 77, a longtime elementary school teacher and a leader in the local Republican Party. She often asked for a sheriff's deputy to accompany her to the elections office in case her meetings became contentious. "Hi, Mary Jane. What can I do for you today?" Elgin asked as she slid a bowl of candy across the counter. "I hope you're having a blessed morning," Zakis said. Unfortunately, a lot of people are still very concerned about the security of their votes. They've lost all trust in the system. "I'd be happy to answer any questions and explain our process again," Elgin said. "We're beyond that," Zakis said. She reached into her purse and set a notarized form on the counter. Elgin recognized it as a recall petition, a collection of signatures from voters who wanted to remove an elected official from office. It had been more than 20 years since the county's last successful recall, and Elgin leaned down to study the form. Quote, "Name of public officer for whom recall is sought, Cindy Elgin." Quote, "Reasons why. Cindy Elgin has run interference in our elections." It was an outcome she'd feared for the last 3.5 years, ever since former President Donald J. Trump lost the 2020 election and his denials and distortions spread outward from the White House to even the country's most remote places, like Esmeralda County. It had neither a stoplight nor a high school, and Elgin knew most of the 620 voters on site. Trump won the county with 82% of the vote, despite losing Nevada. In the days after the election, some residents began to suspect that he should have won by even more, and they parroted Trump's talking points and brought their complaints to the county's monthly commissioner meetings. They falsely claimed the election was stolen by voting software designed in Venezuela or by election machines made in China. They accused George Soros of manipulating Nevada's voter rolls. They blamed, quote, "undercover activists" for stealing ballots out of machines with hot dog tongs. They blamed the Dominion voting machines that the county had been using without incident for 2 decades, saying they could be hacked with a ballpoint pen to, quote, "flip the vote and swing an entire election in 5 minutes. They demanded a future in which every vote in Esmeralda County was cast on paper and then counted by hand.